This episode of Exploration Radio contains language that may be offensive to some listeners.
I just think the greatest way to experience life, well, what I said to one of our daughters once when, she invited me to a school carnival and she said, Mum, come to my school carnival. Off I went to the high school sports carnival and she went in one event. And I said, what a bloody waste of my day. I said, here I am, I've taken a day off work to come and watch you at the school carnival. You're 13, you're old enough to be responsible, and all you do is one event so you can have the day off school. I said, in life you're either a passenger or you're a driver. And I said, so if you want to keep being a passenger, keep just doing the shit that you're doing, but if you want to be a driver, then embrace things and participate. So she said, okay. The next day she came to me after thinking overnight, said, okay, Mum, I've decided next year for school carnival, I'm going to go in absolutely everything and I'm going to get champion girl. I said, oh, really? So, well, just be careful that, you don't shoot too high. But, as a credit to her, bloody kid goes to the school carnival next year, goes in every event, has never done athletics in her life, never thrown a discus in her life, breaks the school record for discus, wins virtually every event but bar a couple and takes out the school champion girl, the champion girl for her age group. And I thought, oh, well, there you go, good advice.
That story perfectly sums up our guest this week, Peta Libby. She's incredibly honest and wholly authentic, wears a heart on her sleeve and shoots from the hip. Despite all the challenges and setbacks this industry has thrown at her, Peta has managed to succeed on her own terms. In our industry, change is inevitable. Maybe the cure for it is adaptability. Now, a word from our sponsors. If you work in a junior level job in mining and want to boost your credentials to break into management, but can't quit to go back to university, consider the new bachelor's degree in the Mining Engineering Technology program at Queen's University. It's fully online and flexible, meaning you can earn while you learn. Want more info? Check out the details at engineering.queensu.ca/CME. That's engineering.queensu.ca/CME. Or if you happen to be at the Canadian Mining Expo this month in Timmins, Ontario, then go say hi to the guys from Queen's University. Now let's get back to the show.
Welcome to Exploration Radio. Our guest today is Peta Libby. So can you introduce yourself and tell our listeners about your background?
Okay, so I'm Peta Libby. I am first and foremost, a wife, a mum, a grandma, and but geology blows my hair back, basically. So I'm also a geologist sort of graduated from UWA in 1990. So I'm a WA girl, born and bred. And I run an exploration contracting consulting business called DigiRock. I discovered from a very young age that I love rocks. I remember a very distinct time. I was brought up in the hills in an orchard, and I remember we were in the Lions Park on up in Stoneville, just on the corner of Riley Road and Stoneville Road, I think. And there was a little park, and all my friends were playing on the swings. They're saying, "Pete, come over and play with us." I'm saying, "No. I'm putting my hand in the clay so I can make by the creek there, so I can make a fossil so that in 2 million years' time people know I was here." And I was only about 5 or 6. So, and it's always fascinated me ever since. And at my 40th birthday, my dad said that someone asked me when I was about 8 years old, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to own a rock shop."
Do you collect minerals or anything?
Oh, God, you should see our upstairs mezzanine outside our bedroom. It's just full of rocks. We've got, because there's sort of three generations of geos in our family. And so we've got all of my father-in-law's rock collection from sort of type examples from around the globe that he collected. And and we've got a geology library with his texts, some first editions as well. And then John and I whenever we travel anywhere, we make sure it's got a geological flavour to it. So Iceland, and we bring back, volcanic bombs from Iceland. And so we've got examples, and we go to Hawaii, and we've got, mantle xenoliths from Hawaii, and all these, olivine crystals and everything that we've got in the collection. And yeah, so it's great. I love it.
Oh, let me get this right. You're the Outstanding Woman in Resources winner for 2018. Tell us about that recognition.
Well, it's really interesting. I suppose I wasn't expecting, although I was a finalist, I wasn't expecting to win. So it was a real surprise, and I didn't anticipate how emotional I'd feel about it and how much it actually meant to me. And I suppose I've been giving a bit of thought over the last few weeks why did it mean so much? And I suppose when you're your own boss, like I am in the business, the only person I've got to answer to is my other director, who's my husband. Then, what we all seek, I suppose, when we work is the recognition of our peers that we're doing a good job. It's important that we get positive feedback to maintain our rage, I suppose. And I suppose for someone like myself, who's my own boss, that's one of the ways you can only get it from your industry and from your clients. And I suppose that's ended up what it was as a bit of positive acknowledgement from my bosses, basically. So it means a lot. And it meant a lot for me, I suppose, because it was tough when I first left university because, I was pregnant when I left uni, and to stay in the industry, it meant a lot because the kids have been dragged backwards through the industry, through their lives. And, we all came out the other end successfully and with something positive. So it meant a lot to myself and my family as well.
Do you think the award was validation for a lot of stuff that you've done during your career as well?
It's funny, possibly, but, you're no different a person the day after the award as you were the day before. So
that's a good point.
So, you're still the same person, but it just reminds you that the things that you have an inherent drive to do, people value. So, and that's a great acknowledgement that things that you value, other people value as well. So that's what's nice about it.
So I wasn't there that night, but I was at the mining club a few days later, and I saw the response from that audience, and you weren't even the speaker. You just got pointed out left, right and centre, It must feel good.
Yeah, look, it was. Sadly, I had raced out to the loo when I was acknowledged at the second time by the main speaker.
That old chestnut.
Yeah, that old chestnut. And so I had to apologise to him afterwards. I said, I'm so sorry, thanks for the acknowledgement. But yeah, it was. I felt almost embarrassed because, you always feel that you're not deserving of it. And so when you're brought to notice in public like that, you get a little bit embarrassed by it. But it is lovely because the mining club is a really interesting mix of people, and of course it's dominantly men. So it's nice to be recognised in a very male environment that I've never ever felt that I was a female in. I only ever felt like I was a geologist in. But it's nice that other people just see you as a person in the industry as well.
So the main conversation point for today, to me at least, and we'll see where the conversation goes, is to talk about balancing careers and family. I've always found it fascinating how, first of all, you tell stories, but secondly, how you actually manage to do this. And you already touched on this, bringing your kids up. Both you and John are both reputable geologists in your own right, how you've balanced the whole family life, etc. In our industry, which is cyclical, we all go through retrenchments. We've had this conversation. In fact, this week's podcast is about why do geologists lose their job? And that's something we've all been through and will continue to go through. So tell us a little bit about being pregnant and leaving uni and still trying to be an explorer.
Well, it was tough because although I always had the academic ability to be a geologist, I was a particularly naughty student, so I wasn't the best attender, and I paid for that in my marks. I met my husband at uni, so we enjoyed being together as a couple and did a lot of partying. So I probably...
You enjoyed the uni life.
I enjoyed the uni life. And you could back then because it was a very egalitarian society back then when we had free university education, So things have changed for university students now. But I do remember, I was sort of 7 months pregnant when I finished and thinking, well, John's on a PhD scholarship. We've got to feed the family somehow. I've got to get out and get myself a job. And baby hadn't been born yet. So I remember stumbling through West Perth in my little maternity frock that my mother-in-law had made for me because we couldn't afford maternity clothes. And I was on Parliament Place there somewhere, and I walked up some steps and I tripped up. I had been walking around West Perth with my CV trying to find a job, and I tripped up these stairs and I just sat there and I sobbed because it was about 35 degrees. I've been walking for 3 days looking for work and no one had anything for me. And this kind man in his business suit came up to me and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm 7 months pregnant. I've just finished university. I'm a geologist and no one wants to give me a job." But of course, people are, in this world, 99.9% of people are lovely, and, they pick you up and get you on your feet again. So it was nice that man sort of, spurred me on a bit. And then, of course, my old boss rang me and said, here, I've got a job for you. Come and help us set up our office in Perth. So I did that. And, of course, tragically, I went into labour in front of them. My waters broke in front of him when I was telling him that I didn't think I'd be at the office the next day because I thought I was in labour. So that was a bit of a joke. He's had 2 of his female geologists do that to him in the business. So I wasn't the first. So he's perfectly used to it. Nothing unusual for them. But, I suppose for us, we really just had to knuckle down and, do what we could to make a crust and to get through. And we ended up, I suppose John had met for his PhD and said, well, I've got to go out in the field for 3 months. See you later. I said, no way, mate. You're not leaving me behind with a newborn baby, 6 weeks old, a dog, a cat, and a house to clean and everything. I said, I'm coming with you. So we left the cat behind for my mother-in-law to feed. And we took off with the baby in a baby capsule and the dog and a rifle for 3 months in a swags and a big trailer full of I suppose you could call them bulk boxes of disposable nappies and a playpen, and off we went and hit the road for 3 months. Used to shoot room meat for the dog, and the baby would sleep in the car in the baby capsule with the dog, and John and I would be in the swag, and we had a great time.
So where was this?
So we started out, went up through Coolyonobbing, sort of Mount Jackson Dimels, a lot of time around Sandstone, and then up the back road, past Yaliri Station, Cashmere Downs, up to Walloona, out east of Walloona to Lake Violet Station, down the back through Barwidgee, and then down the back way from Barwidgee into Leinster, which is a story in amongst itself, getting stuck in an aerial muster with a baby screaming in the back and the dog barking at all the other dogs when we were being bombarded, when we were being swooped by an aerial mustering plane. And then we ended up, went down to Leonora, went east of Leonora, and then down to Cow, out to Coroni. And I think John was visiting a site south of Coroni. One of the girls said, there's a really great opal mine down there. So someone took us down there and she said, I'll have your baby for the day. So she looked after the baby for the day and off we went, and we came back to Perth 3 months later. It was great.
Wow.
So how many children have you got?
2 girls.
2 girls. Yeah. So where in your career did the second child arrive? So
I was working I had various part-time office roles when our eldest girl, Sammy, was a baby. And then I was offered a job with Hunter Resources. So the late Bruce Nesbitt offered me work there. Actually, it wasn't Bruce. I worked for Bruce. But it was another guy that worked there. And they saw that I was holding down 3 part-time jobs and said, just come and work for us and have 1 job. And so that's what I did. And then a year into that role, I was pregnant with a second, and I said to John, hey, mate, your scholarship's running out. You're 4 years into your PhD. About time you got a real job. So he, I think it was a hormonally induced screaming fit in the kitchen, I think. poor bastard. And so Megan Clark, who was with Western Mining then, she's the ex-director or CEO of CSIRO and now on the board of Rio. So Megan interviewed John and offered him a role in Leinster. And we said, we'll be there. So she offered him the role and off we went. So Courtney was, I think, 8 weeks old when we moved up to...
So that was a residential role?
Yeah, residential role. And that's how I managed to stay in the business of being in the field as a geologist. So I worked as an underground mine geologist there. But if I hadn't have been residential, there was no way I could have done that.
So there's a digression to take for a second there, which is about most of us grew up in residential roles, and they are key formative parts of the friends that we have, the families that we have. I met my wife in that scenario.
And the support that you have as well in those communities.
Support is amazing. Yeah.
And that is missing, obviously, largely now. I think we don't talk about how to maintain a career, and that's actually what we want to talk about today, is how do you maintain a career under the trials and tribulations of life? And residential was a key component of it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if we hadn't gone residential, I certainly wouldn't have had the opportunities that I have now. I wouldn't have worked for Western Mining and been in that world-class learning environment that they provided. And same as our daughter now. She's married, got a baby. She works in mining. She's a a drilling logistics officer, and she lives residentially in Newman with her husband and 2 children. And she wouldn't be able to have a career because she was FIFO. She wouldn't have been able to maintain a career without that. But I think what, those residential roles for us back in the day, although we were separated enormously from our families, because of course it was so much more expensive to have air travel, and it was a 10-hour drive back to Perth, so you only got back to Perth once or twice a year, and you didn't have Skype, so it was an STD phone call that was 50 cents a minute or whatever it used to cost to ring home, and the pips used to go on the phone. It was, quick, hurry up, it's STD. So really that was what enabled me to stay in the sector, and all those people that we had around us became our family, our neighbours, our workmates, and then those workmates as our industry peers today who are now leaders in their own right in the sector.
We're getting close to the story about forming Digirock, which is a pretty interesting one in its own right. But before I get there, I want to talk about health.
Yes.
And you went through your own health crisis. When was that, and what sort of impact it had on your career?
So I've got Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid. So my thyroid has been killed by my immune system. And that happened postpartum after our second child was born. And the symptoms didn't really knock me for a six until she was about almost 2 years old. And, it was just, I had uncoordination. I was spilling coffee down the front of me. My short-term memory went, and I was really quite unwell. And so I ended up, because country GPs back in the day didn't necessarily have all the training they have now, my GP just told me, because I was suffering from fibromyalgia, to go home and take some anti-inflammatories. And then, of course, one of my close friends from high school is a dentist, and I went to see her, and she said, "Oh, Pete, I reckon you've got hypothyroidism. You should go get your thyroid levels tested." So I went back to my GP, Dr. Scragg was his name, in Leinster, and I said, "Oh, I think I need to have my thyroid levels done." He said, call me back in 2 weeks and said, "I need to talk to you about your thyroid levels. You're just about dead, basically." So I think my thyroid stimulating hormones levels were through the roof. And he said, "I'm really, really pleased. You're the first one I've ever diagnosed with hypothyroidism."
Oh, wow.
So, I had to take a couple of weeks off work. I was be 35 degrees outside, and I'd have the heater on inside, and I'd be just lying on the couch, comatose. But eventually I got back to work. But I just think, there's probably a familial and genetic link to it. But I think it's just the lifestyle that we lead when we push ourselves a bit too hard.
Are you somebody who this is the logical consequence of your behaviour?
I think so. I think, when we push ourselves too hard, we put our immune system kind of goes into collapse or overdrive, and that's probably what did it to me. And I think there's lots of A-type personalities that probably suffer from some sort of thyroid or autoimmune disorder.
Or even, there are a variety of ways it can manifest. Thyroid is just one example.
Absolutely.
So I suffer from a balance problem. And one of the things we want to talk about is balance. So you've had a health crisis, you're an A-type personality, and here you are successful. Tell us about how you balance time.
How do you balance time? Well, there was a really interesting thing that I heard at I think it was a Seroptimus lunch that one of our girls that worked for us once invited me to. And Janet Holmes, a court presented at it. And she said, anyone that tells you that they've got the perfect work-life balance is lying. And I thought, you're right. Because there is no perfect work-life balance. There are things that I've got to give, and you can't say yes to everything. And it did take a GP, a really excellent GP, to tell me once when an endocrinologist I went and saw told me when I went in with another, a post being medicated, and about 15 years later going with another health crisis saying, "I've gone crazy, help me." And he said, "Oh, you're just depressed. Here, have some antidepressants." I said, "I'm not bloody depressed. I don't want to be depressed. How come everyone's depressed these days?" So I went and I refused to pay his bill, and I said, "I'm not paying for your service. You're useless. And I'm not paying for your next BMW." So I went and saw a GP up in the hills who was a locum up there, and she was a cousin of someone that I knew from when I was a teenager. And she said, "Now tell me about your life, Peter." And I told her what I did. And she said, "Well, She said, I've got one thing to say to you. She said, you're not depressed, you're just fucking stupid. She says, I want you to go home and write 20 ways to say no, get fucked, I'm not doing it on a piece of paper. When someone says to you, can you be on the P&C? Can you do this? Can you do that? For the next year, I want you to say no. Best advice I ever had.
So, as an outsider, as a person who can't say no, you don't look like you say no.
Well, I've got worse at saying no over the years, and particularly this year.
Time to see the doctor again?
I know, mate. Well, actually, it's funny you should say that. I went yesterday because I'm failing to say no. And then you start getting all this anxiety kicking you, thinking, God, I've got to do this and I've got to do that. How am I going to prepare for this? How am I going to prepare for that? So, you kind of go through these recurrent episodes of, I'm doing too much, it's time to slow down. So yeah. I think that if you're inherently someone that, I don't know if it's that we have FOMO, fear of missing out, or whether we just, I just think the greatest way to experience life, well, what I said to one of our daughters once when, she invited me to a school carnival and she said, Mum, come to my school carnival. Off I went to the high school sports carnival and she went in one event. And I said, what a bloody waste of my day. I said, here I am, I've taken a day off work to come and watch you at the school carnival. You're 13, you're old enough to be responsible, and all you do is one event so you can have the day off school. I said, in life, you're either a passenger or you're a driver. And I said, so if you want to keep being a passenger, keep just doing the shit that you're doing. But if you want to be a driver, then embrace things and participate. So she said, okay. The next day she came to me after thinking overnight, said, okay, Mum, I've decided. Next year for school carnival, I'm going to go in absolutely everything and I'm going to get champion girl. I said, oh, really? I said, well, just be careful that, you don't shoot too high. But, as a credit to her, bloody kid goes to the school carnival next year, goes in every event, has never done athletics in her life, never thrown a discus in her life, breaks the school record for discus, wins virtually every event but bar a couple and takes out the school champion girl, the champion girl for her age group. And I thought, oh, well, there you go. Good advice. So I think that, you have to say yes to things in life because otherwise, well, not yes to everything, but if you've got to have a bit of a plan about where you want your life to take you. And once you kind of know a rough idea about where you're going to, then when you're offered an opportunity, you can either say yes or no to it. And if it takes you away, leads you off on a path away from your goal, then, immediately you can say no to it. But if it looks like it's going to take you in that right direction with just maybe a little bit of a bend in the road, well, you just say yes, So I just think you've got to say yes to opportunities.
So are you someone that is good at figuring out those opportunities, or do you rely on kind of a support network around you or other people like your husband or family to kind of guide you?
Well, I think they're two separate issues, two separate things. I fully rely on a support network. I rely on my husband, my mum and dad, my brother, you name it, my good friends. I just think that we've all got to be, we're all put on this earth to help each other and help each other be successful. And so that support network is really, really important. And I wouldn't be where I am today without that. No man exists on an island by themselves, basically. But then as far as opportunities go, taking opportunities is something that's really important. And you need support to be able to take those opportunities. I could never, within the business that we have, I could never, as a parent of teenagers, gone and done field work in exploration if my parents hadn't helped and had the kids for a week, a month, basically. So it wouldn't have happened. So yeah, some of those opportunities you've got to have an immense amount of support for.
So let's talk about DigiRock. Tell us a little bit about what is DigiRock and how you formed.
So DigiRock, so we're contract consultant exploration geologists. We were living in Leinster and we moved, we'd been in Leinster for 5 years, and Western mining was changing a lot during that time, and our vision was always that we would hopefully work overseas one day, and that's one of the reasons we joined Western mining, because they had overseas opportunities. But a lot of those opportunities were shutting down, and likewise a lot of opportunities in Australia were shutting down. It was a big time of change. No one knew what was going to happen with regards to the new native title legislation, how it was going to
That's
impact
right.
on exploration. So people were kind of, crawling back into their snail shells and just waiting to see what happened. So there was an opportunity for John to move into a new role in the Northern Territory with another company. And, we always wanted to see the rest of Australia and work somewhere different in different terrains. So off we went. But at that time, John, the job was 50 k's out of town, out of Tennant Creek where we moved to. And we were living in Tennant Creek because there was no company housing out at the town of Warrego around the mine site. So there was an opportunity for me to have a role there, but I hadn't established a support network in Tennant Creek, so I didn't feel that I could really take that role. And I was we just sold, I think AMP demutualised and Colonial Mutual, and we luckily decided to sell our shares on day of listing and had about 25 grand in our pockets. And so I'd always wanted to have a business of my own one day, because I'd come from a long line of, orchardists and, business people and, I suppose way back miners in my gene pool. And so it was never anything frightening to me to go out and start a business. So we just went, well, that's it, start a business. So, and that was how I got my flexibility. So it meant that I could be at home with the kids, but also work and maintain my skills. And so DigiRock was born.
So one of the things I think of DigiRock now is it's addressing a shortfall in our industry's development process. They're a very practical group based on fundamentals. Was that always part of the design, or is this something that emerged?
No, it's funny because when I decided to start up the business, the NT government had a bit of a small business mini sort of certificate course that they had for 5 days. They had people come up from Adelaide and down from Darwin to present to anyone who wanted to start a business in Tennant Creek, free of charge. So myself and a whole pile of other people, probably 50 blokes and women actually, we all went and did this course. And one of the things was how to write a business plan. So, I went through and, being the diligent student I'd now become, wrote my business plan about, what DigiRock was. And I wrote sort of into 5 years what was going to happen, that, John would join the business one day. But really, initially, it was for me to maintain my skills and not lose the skills that I already had, and to give me the flexibility that I needed to be able to balance the kids with work. So I don't think I never really visualised what it would be today. But I think those inherent things that you learned at Western Mining around training and making people be the best people they can be, and mentoring was a fundamental that stuck with me through the business.
So do you think that the core skill development is something that big companies still look after, or that our industry still looks after?
Look, I don't think we do it as well as we used to. I think it's a lot harder now. There's a lot more pressure from shareholders to be more lean, and perhaps the value isn't put on the training that it used to be. And there are different areas of training. Of course, safety is one of the biggest things these days. It's all done around risk. So, you've got a lot of big companies have got to weigh the risk of someone potentially being catastrophically injured in the field or finding their next mine. So when you're balancing where the money's going to go, a lot of that's got to go into getting people work ready and safe. That's a really important moral obligation. That's a really important moral obligation we all have. But I think that because we have such high turnover rates now in industry as well, people are a lot more mobile. Maybe companies are failing to put that money into the fundamental technical training that needs to be done.
So I guess they, one school of thought is that a lot of major companies don't see the return on investment in, putting development into their employees. So how do you guys justify that in DigiRock?
Well, I suppose we try and employ the exploration managers and leaders of the future. That's who we're looking for when we interview. And we know that the better they are now, that the better geologists we make them now, the better they are going to be in the future. And eventually they're going to outgrow our company, they're going to move on. So one day they're going to be our peers, our clients. So the better we can make them, the more discoveries that are made. And it sustains us having work in the sector, I suppose. It's self-perpetuating.
I can see the Western Mining influence on your values, but the value component I see in DigiRock now. How do you manage to maintain that when by definition your people work for somebody else?
We very much recruit to our values. So when we advertise and when we interview, questions are asked around our values. And so when we sort of select someone to interview, we've got to see that there's an alignment with our values from the outset. There's got to be something special in the person that we interview. And then the values are threaded through our professional development reviews annually, our feedback loops that we have from our clients, and the feedback loops we have from our staff, because we want our clients to share similar values as well. We don't want to work for clients that don't value family and don't value quality and things like that. We want people to be doing things for the right reasons. So certainly that value of family is the hardest to instill when you've got people working sort of remotely from your organisation and you're not their line manager. So we try and organise regular catch-ups. We try and make sure we're talking to people on the phone, encouraging them to come into the office. You know, if someone has a baby, we're always excited for them and we send them a gift, a baby gift, or if there's a birthday, we send people a birthday card because they're part of our DigiRock family. They have to, those important milestones in their life are milestones for us as well. So we need to celebrate it with them.
How have you managed to balance your career with your husband, who's a reputable geologist in his own right, and bring up a family? And is that something that you look to instill in the people you hire?
Oh, absolutely. I suppose, I've always been very fortunate in that either my employers chose me or I chose them. I don't quite know which way around it went. But my first employer, the main one that I had was through university, and it was Pinnacle Travel and Tours. And I had been in Japan for a year and I spoke Japanese. And so I was kind of the domestic travel consultant part-time while I studied part-time in my first year at university. And I went all the way through till I finished university and worked there for the first 2 years until I went to Leinster. And when I had Marilyn Reedhead was the lady, and Bob, she was a station, they were off the station in the Murchison. Amazing people that all their daughters, their sons-in-law all worked in the business, and both her and her husband worked. They all had their strengths and they all worked to their strengths. And when Sammy was born, Marilyn said to me, "Can you come back and work on a Sunday for us? And when the tours go out, can you meet and greet everybody and make sure you're there to translate the Japanese and everything?" And I said, "Oh, look, what am I going to do with Sammy? John's, got to get his PhD done." And she'd say, "Oh, just bring her into the office, she'll be fine." And so I used to do that. And her daughter, who was probably, about 18 or 17 at the time, she was still at school because she was in a school uniform, I remember. But she used to just look after Sammy. So if a client came in the door, Jen would just, not Jen, next one down. Yeah. Jen, I think it was, used to take her out the back and take Sammy out the back and in the baby capsule and rock her and keep her happy until the client had gone. So that was, I learnt from a very young age that there are ways, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There are ways that you can balance having children and working, And so I suppose I used to think, well, if it can be done there, it can be done anywhere. And, one of the things I think, I suppose I probably work by the philosophy, ask for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. And I remember one of our youngest daughter, Courtney, had chickenpox this one time and I had to get an oil reserve out. And I thought, Jesus, she's got chickenpox. What am I going to do? John's got to go to work. I've got to go to work. She can't go to daycare. I thought, oh, well, bugger it. I'll just put her in the car. And she would have been about 4. And I'll just sit her in my office behind the door and hopefully no one even noticed she's there. So she had a little foam pull-out lounge behind the door and, she had a little snack box and a little drinks there and she was quite happy. She was beyond the contagious stage, but she wasn't allowed to go to school. But then the mine manager wanted to come in to talk to me about something and he knocked on my door and pushed my door open. I went, "Oh, hang on, Max." I said, "Don't push too hard." He said, "Why? What's wrong?" I said, "Child with chickenpox behind door, do not enter." He went, "Oh, okay." Closed the door and walked off and never a word was said. So I was really lucky that I was surrounded by really good people that just went, "Oh, well, it's happened. It's successful. Let's not stress about it."
So both Ahmed and I have partners who are geologists, and so this is a conversation that comes up between us as to how we balance careers between ourselves and our partners. How do you and John sort that out, or how has that been sorted out in your career?
Well, look, I think, at first when I graduated, John had invested far more time into his career than me because he started he'd done honours and started his PhD. Sadly, when I had my dummy spit, he had to stop his PhD and never actually got it written up. So I felt that John had invested far more in his career than I had, and that he deserved to take the first opportunity. And I knew there'd be an opportunity for me as well because, I would find one or make one. So it was always almost non-verbal. We just both, by mutual consent, agreed to stuff. It always just felt natural. And there have been, other times that, I don't even think that, really either of us has had to take a back seat. There's always been another opportunity that we've been able to figure out to make it work. So it's just done by consent, I suppose, but you don't even know you're doing it half the time. Like, you don't even know you're compromising. And I think that's the beauty about a good relationship, is that you don't know you're compromising, and you just say, and it's like sharing the car, what are you up to today? I've got to do this, got to do that. Oh, well, you can't have the car because I've got to go here and I don't want to take the tray back because it's really hard to reverse in the city. So you figure out, what you're going to do about cars, the same way you do with kids. It's pretty easy to sort out. The solution becomes pretty obvious, I think.
So do you think you've had to make any sacrifices along the way now when you look back?
Well, look, John and I had planned when we finished uni and he finished his PhD that I'd work for 2 years when I got my degree, and then we'd travel around the world for a year or two, and we'd start off in South America and we'd use his US citizenship and we'd live in the States for a while and work in the States and see the geology there, and we just work our way around the globe. And of course, you get up the duff when you're in April of your final year of university, and that kind of puts a kibosh on those plans. But we never felt like we missed out, We wouldn't change it for the world. And, I would have loved to have started out in exploration rather than mining. But being a mine geologist changed my whole perspective. It gave me a full picture of the business of mining and exploration from cradle to grave, I suppose. So I certainly, although I wanted to be an exploration geologist, that mine experience was so valuable to my career development. So I don't feel that I really missed out on that much. I did bemoan when we first got to Leinster and I couldn't get a job. And I remember ringing John Ronsky saying, "John, what have I done with my life? I'm stuck in Leinster and no one will give me a bloody job. They want an honours degree and I've only got a BSc and, I'm not qualified enough to be a geologist with Western Mining." And he said, "Oh, Pete, in his very steady, measured way, he said, well, maybe you should go back and do a master's or something if you can't get work." I thought, oh, that's a really good idea. Great advice, John. Of course, I applied for the master's course and they wouldn't let me in because I didn't have a good enough academic grade. But it was people like John Ronsky who really kept my chin up and always provided good mentoring advice. I had wonderful people around me that always were good friends and good mentors.
So that's one of the things that I miss. The Western mining mafia is still important to my career now. It's one of these things, the support network that's around you. I wonder how modern company people who are turning over so often are going to go. I guess you'll have your own DigiRock family and that will be everywhere. Maybe that'll be a mafia in the future. Well,
I really hope so, because the model was, the DigiRock model was kind of predicated on Resource Service Group as well, because that was my first lot of VAC work I had. And so the business that Rick Yates and Julian Barnes built was phenomenal, really inclusive. We were 50-50 guys and girls back in 1988. It was a really egalitarian time back then. I never noticed that I was a girl in the mining industry, and it really wasn't until people start asking you about it, you go, oh shit, yeah, I am a girl in a men's industry. I kind of forget about that because I only ever felt a geologist. I was never discriminated against. Maybe there were some unconscious biases there in the past, but I never perceived them. If I reflect on my career, perhaps there were. But me being the A-type personality that I am, if I ever saw an injustice done to me, I'd thump my hand on the my fist on the desk and say, well, that's not me. It's not good enough for me. That's not the solution. I want something different, So to my bosses and everything, and I'm sure I made a few of my bosses squirm because I wasn't the meek, mild, graduate that I probably should have been. I was always very outspoken and probably tend to shoot from the hip a bit too much, and it gets me into trouble. Yeah.
So do you ever think like you being a female in mining has been a detriment in your career at all?
No, never. If anything, I think, you stick out like dog's balls because you're a female, and and also my name's a bit unusual. It's Peta Libby. So, is it a male? Is it a female? Have I got the name the right way round? So my name, Libby Peter, and everyone calls John Peter and me Libby, and they go, oh, sorry. Even people that have known us for 30 years do the same thing. So I think that if anything, it's been a positive thing because, when you're working with a drilling crew, I mean, I've had some drillers that have been a little bit difficult, but I just gave it back as good as I got. And by the end of the day, we'd have the conversation in the wedding. Maybe we should start again and reintroduce ourselves, and because I knew I was going to back down. So, I've had a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, I just think being a female meant that the drillers actually didn't feel like there wasn't an ego they had to compete with. So they were actually probably far more giving with their information and their teachings that they could. So I learned a lot about drilling. I was really, really lucky and was taught a lot by the drilling crews. And I love drilling. I love the mechanics of it and how it works. And my eldest daughter also has the same passion as well because she started in the industry about the same age I did.
So one of the final things we want to talk about is the cyclic nature of our industry. It's clearly affected your ability to get a job in the first place. It affects pretty much everyone's career. And you run a business that's hyper exaggerated because of the nature of the business. How do you build midterm plans when that cycle affects you probably first?
Yeah, look, exploration is certainly the canary in the coal mine for our sector, and we tend to feel any downturn 2 years before the mining space does, and we also feel the uplift 2 years before, so we're kind of the barometer for the sector. Those 7 to 10 year cycles are things that we can't change. We just have to know that they exist, and as surely as it's going to go up, it's going to go down again, and as sure as it goes down, it's going to come up. So we just have to basically become the most efficient business you can be to get through those times. And I suppose the nature of contract work is that people that come into the business understand that. I think the biggest thing for us is understanding, to go back to my point about the cyclical nature, just got to make sure you don't carry a lot of capital debt. You've got to make sure that you've got as little debt as possible that you've got to service. And you've got to make sure you run a business that's, as cash flow positive as possible. And you don't have to repay banks and you don't have high outgoings, fixed overheads, just to make sure that you can, I suppose, recession-proof yourself or, downturn-proof yourself. But then the big thing for a company like ours is the seasonality of exploration. Because, of course, everything goes crazy around November, everyone trying to finish everything up in the field seasons. And then by mid-December, you've got half the people working that were working on the 30th of November. And by January, you've got half the people again working. And then by February, you've got maybe one person extra working. And then March, it slowly picks up and then picks up again to April, May. Then June, July, it plateaus and sometimes even drops. And then it starts picking up and crescendoing back up to November. So you almost need double the people. You probably need 3 or 4 times the people in November to what you need in January. So that's a really hard thing, but that's an opportunity in itself. Because that means that over that Christmas period when we want to spend time with family, and a lot of our grads that have joined us over the years are from the Northern Hemisphere, so it means that they can go home and spend time with family and make sure they stay connected to their family in that off-season and then come back. So the seasonality is our biggest challenge, I think. And then as long as we don't have high levels of debt and a high level of fixed overheads in our business, then we can ride that downturn in the 7 to 10 year cycle.
So you started your own business. It's never been easier to start your own business than right now. You can do it online. What advice would you give your staff or anybody, our listeners, on future-proofing your career to deal with cycles?
What advice? Well, number one is being made redundant or, having a downturn is in itself can be an opportunity. So, when John was made redundant in 2002, and we just both worked part-time out of DigiRock, because that was before we started employing staff. We started employing staff in 2005. We thought, well, we'll just take every school holidays with the kids and just enjoy our life. And this is a gifted opportunity on a platter where you get a redundancy and you can, you could pay off your house and that would future-proof you. But, we'd never had time to enjoy our family. We'd always been working to survive. So it was our first opportunity to actually just be a family and go, bugger it, let's go down to Margaret River for the weekend and go camping. I mean, certainly it was done on a shoestring and, camper trailer and free campsites all the way around the south coast every time we went on holidays. But I remember my mum saying to me, God, you live in a 100 square metre house and you've got the kids and you always have extra kids come and live with you and your girls have to share a bedroom and you can't swing a cat, you've got one bathroom. Don't you think you need to live in, you should be working full time and having a bigger house? I went, oh yeah, man, maybe one day, but everything's fine as it is at the moment. So you've got to be careful that you don't let material things drive you. And that, at the end of the day, the reason we work is about our families and providing a good future for our children, staying healthy, and if we can enjoy our jobs at the same time, then we've hit the jackpot. So that's it, really.
So I see you everywhere now. You really are front and centre in giving back to the industry. Sounds like it's part of your personality. Is that true? Are you giving back? Is that deliberate?
Yeah, well, I don't know. You don't even notice that you're giving back because it gives me an inordinate amount of pleasure to feel that I'm helping somebody. I've been pretty privileged through my life to have learnt what I've learnt and have the opportunities that I've had. And once you have those skill sets, then I think it's beholden upon you to share them with people and to make sure that other people get the same opportunities. I really, although when I grew up on the orchard as a young kid, we were bloody poor. We ate offal and we did all that stuff. And I remember my mum telling me that she felt so bad because she didn't have 20 cents to buy me a pair of baby stockings and stuff to keep me warm in the winter. And it's like, well, but we were happy. And so you can come from very humble beginnings. And, I'd come from a family that had set up an orchard up in the hills and they'd done reasonably well. They had a market garden, extended family had a market garden in the southwest, started in the early 1900s. But in the crash of the 1920s, my great-grandfather and his brother-in-law invested in a big department store in Perth and the family fortunes. And, of course, the crash of the 1920s came and they did their dough and the department store went out of business. So all that money that our family had worked hard for when they first came out from the UK was all gone. So we were back living hand to mouth with this big orchard. And, so from very humble beginnings. But my great-grandfather, no matter what, he still took, during the war, he still took apples and donated fruit to Parkville Children's Home because that was around the corner from us. All of my grandfather, my father's been in Lions, my mum's always done stuff to help people. So I just think it's in your genetics. And I think that it's that fourth level of reward you get in your life. There are certain things you need to feel whole as a person. And, there are some very basic things that you need in life. You need food, shelter, you need that sort of stability, good health. And then the more you have, you get yourself a good job. And then that fourth thing is the thing that you're able to do once you have all those things lined up, that you're able to give back. And that's that, I don't know whether it's a spiritual thing, that's that level of enlightenment that you get from it. But I get a really lovely sense of reward and I suppose it must be endorphins from it.
So it's fair to say that you believe in the concept of like pay it forward because
absolutely.
Of the help that you've got through your career?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be there if people hadn't have thought that, hadn't given me the opportunities and taken a chance on me. And so I think everybody deserves that in life, that, that everyone's, most people are good people and everyone has their talent and everyone deserves to find that talent and be given the opportunity to make the most of it.
Because I think, having dealt with DigiRock people, I think that's something you fostered in your company as well. That I think that concept that you give something to your employees so they give something back as well.
Look, Look, I like all the people that work for us, and I think that's one of the most important things. You've got to like them and have a connection with them. And so because we recruit for culture, they're not just a bunch of management wanky words, they're actually part of the way we operate our business. They're the way we make decisions. And so the people that join our business have the same set of values, and they care about community. Virtually every person that comes and works at DigiRock has volunteered in some shape or form in their life. And that's one of our key recruitment criteria. They have got to have given back somewhere. So no volunteer work, no interview. I just think that, people that don't put their hobbies on a piece of paper, how can you differentiate yourself from Joe Bloggs next to you, or Joe or Janet Bloggs next to you, who's got exactly the same looking CV from exactly the same university, and how can you tell that they're different? So you've got to the only way to personalise your CV is to put something of yourself in it.
So I agree. Communicate that you're a person.
Yeah. And when you write your bloody cover letter, don't say, I'm conscientious, hard-working, trustworthy. Demonstrate it. Tell me why you're conscientious. Tell me why you're trustworthy. Tell me why you're intelligent. Just don't tell me you are, because I'm not going to believe you.
Because, I guess I find that really interesting because like the HR world that we sometimes live in kind of says that, experience is more, like technical experience or whatever experience is more important than any of these other intrinsic characteristics of people. This conversation goes completely opposite to that.
Oh, absolutely. I've read one business or management leadership book in my life. Can't remember the name, for the life of me, the name of it, but it was right bums in seats. That was the main message, was you put those right bums in seats, because trying to prize the wrong bums out of those seats is pretty bloody hard. And so you've got to recruit for the things that matter to your business. And once you can have someone who doesn't have the technical skill set. Even if someone doesn't have the right mineral exploration geology units in their undergraduate degree, doesn't mean they're not going to be a good mineral explorer. It just means that they might need to do some more training. They might need to go back and do a master's in mineral exploration at some stage. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be good, as long as they've got all those other things that are about customer service. It's because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do, whether you're a contractor or you work on staff for someone, you are providing a service to somebody. You're providing a service to a metallurgist, to an engineer, to an accountant. So we're all service providers. And I think the sooner people realise that we are all in the business of customer service, the better and the more enjoyment we will get out of our careers and the jobs that we do, and the better we'll be able to perform our jobs.
That's really cool. I think one of the things that I really liked when I heard career advice I was given is that everyone should go work like 6 months or a year in a retail customer service kind of job, because I think you then realize how to deal with people,
Absolutely.
What matters, all that stuff.
My first job was at McDonald's. When McDonald's first came to Australia, came to WA, I worked at McDonald's Belmont, and of course McDonald's Belmont hasn't changed since I was a kid. So I went to QW.
Pretty rough assignment, really.
Yeah, it was a pretty rough assignment, but it was a great assignment, because that's where I grew up. After I left the orchard and Mum and Dad travelled around Australia for a year off, we went to live in Belmont, because that was all they could afford, where they could afford to buy. And so I was brought up, everyone where I was brought up was, you either wanted to become a bikie or a bikie's girlfriend. So us that had a passion for, and that's a little bit of an over exaggeration, but it's by no stretch of the imagination a lie. A lot of the kids that I grew up with actually ended up as bikies. So it's by no means a lie. But the training I got at McDonald's was all around customer service. We had challenges of, I remember one thing, we had to deliver food to the client within 2 minutes or they got their meal for free. We had, you had to open up the store and get all the machines organised, put together the ice cream and the milkshake machine. And if you got the O-rings in around the wrong way, or, all the fluid would leak all the milk would be over the floor in the morning. And so there was some challenges. And the best thing that I learned at McDonald's was, would you like fries with that? And I always remind our staff, always subtly remind our clients, would they like fries with that? Because often people don't know they want something until they realise what they're missing out on.
That's gold.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
So yeah, it's very, very important. And one of the things that we look for when we recruit people is that people have worked in customer service, that they've worked in a restaurant, they've had to deal with difficult people that don't like the food or have a complaint, because there will always be complaints and problems to solve, and you've got to have been put into that difficult situation to know how to find your way around it. And also, I don't want to employ kids that have never worked, that don't know what it's like to work. Go and work for somebody else.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I need young graduates that know what it's like to have a job and know what it's like to get up in the morning, go to work and deliver. Because I don't want us to be the first people that they figure out that they don't like working.
Yeah.
So it's important.
So just a couple more things to finish up. One of the questions we ask all our guests is, what idea inside exploration in the mining industry, can be concept or behaviour, needs to die? Something that we currently do that you would like to stop?
I would like to see that we're putting our drillers no longer are being paid by the meter, that they're being paid by the quality of their work. And that's not the drilling company's fault, that's the client's fault, because clients don't quite know how to value a contract on quality. So we don't quite know how to do that yet. And I want to see that our drilling contractors in particular aren't screwed to the ground constantly, because they are the lifeblood of our industry. And if we, people say, oh, geez, I just got this really great rate on this drilling contract. Don't know how these guys can make a quid. Well, they're not making a quid. They could sit on the beach and lose money, less money than working for some of these people that say that they screwed their drilling contractors into the ground. But these drilling contractors are the lifeblood of our industry, and they're struggling to find drillers and offsiders because they cannot pay them the money that they need to or offer them the conditions. So they have to have these longer work cycles. So, some drilling companies still have to have 6-in-1 rosters. And it was like that back in 1988. Oh, well, mind you, some of them were doing 363 days and 1 day off back in 1988. But, the 6-in-1 roster is old school. And we should be paying filling our contracts and paying a reasonable amount for our contracts so we don't have to make people work 6-in-1 anymore, and that the productivity isn't screwed down, it's the quality we're looking for. And if we go to that quality basis, I think we'll change the whole industry and our safety outcomes, our retention rates, and we'll get better quality drilling results as well.
There's that concept that, the race to the bottom, no one's going to win, really.
Absolutely. No one ever wins the race to the bottom. Yeah.
Last question related to that one, which is around flexibility in our industry. Is it your own personal job to manage your flexibility and your career or the balance? Is it your company's job? Is it something that everybody should be concerned about as to how we maintain the rage and build towards the future?
There's an interesting thing about fault and responsibility going around on the internet. And so whilst it might be your company's fault that you don't have flexibility, it's your responsibility to make sure you have it. So, we need to vote with our feet and push back and go and work for the companies that provide that flexibility. And that's not just for women in the workforce, that's for our men. Women can't be equally represented in the workforce until our men have given the flexibility as well. Because without that flexibility, you both can't have a career. So I think that our men are the forgotten part of the equation, and that there's not enough flexibility afforded to our men. It's a natural. For me, it's logical that men and women should have the same flexibility, but sadly, men aren't afforded the same flexible opportunities, and society doesn't allow our men to, because there's still a very, very old school societal approach that if a bloke says, I'm going to pick up the kids from daycare, I've got to leave 2 hours earlier, or the kid's sick, one of the kids is sick, I've got to go home and get them, why can't your wife do that? That's what his peers are telling him, his male peers. That's just ridiculous. I can't believe that people still say that, but they do, and so that's got to change.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Peta, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
In neuroscience, there's a well-understood concept called brain plasticity. Effectively, it refers to the brain's ability to change throughout an individual's life. Previously, we'd always assumed that the brain develops during a critical period and then stays static throughout the rest of a person's life. There are many scales at which you can observe the effect of this plasticity. One of the simplest and probably most evident would be the survival of certain species. It is not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones that are most responsive to change. Talking to Peta, he realized pretty quickly that she's innately adaptable, or in her words, she just gets on with things and focuses on being the driver rather than the passenger in life. So what if to survive in this industry, the most important thing is adaptability? We are continuously asking companies to change, but the change is not about things, it's about people. Maybe it's time we think about being more adaptable as well. So the question is, how plastic is your mindset? Exploration Radio is brought to you by Steve and Ahmad. Our producer and all-round go-to guy is Dan Hershowitz. This podcast is recorded at the Perth Music House. If you'd like to know more about Exploration Radio, check us out on explorationradio.com. Or you can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And as always, if you like this podcast, please review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Until next time, let's keep exploring.